I think this is an interesting point because some people have never really had an issue with anxiety, but then after perhaps they have a kid, this is something that they have to deal with now. And so maybe let's describe what exactly postpartum anxiety is and your role in the things that you're doing with it.
Yeah. So postpartum anxiety is it's pretty similar to regular anxiety, but it focuses on baby, focuses on the health, the well-being, the behaviors of the baby. And often we see moms kind of focusing on their bodies and their health as well. And what we see in postpartum anxiety is a lot of thinking, a lot of sometimes behaviors, cleaning, a lot of fear. And one thing to note is that the postpartum brain is very wired to be in a heightened state of alert, right? Like after you have a baby, evolutionary wise, we're in this heightened state of alert. So we're watching out for our baby so the baby doesn't die. And sometimes that malfunctions and then it goes beyond what's actually useful. And then we're doing things that are actually creating more anxiety. And so it's just something that I think gets missed a lot because number one, I think it's very difficult for moms to admit like, okay, I'm not feeling well here.
Yeah.
And number two, sometimes it's really hard to notice because things like sleep deprivation, things like, all the focus is on baby, that sometimes it's missed.
Well, I'm sure you're also going through, I mean, the hormone changes have to be insane. It's got to be kind of a very eye-opening experience the first time you go through that part, and then also feeling that I'm sure it can be very confusing. Is like, is it all these emotions that I'm feeling? Is it the biological drives that are like making me feel this way? I guess like when is it considered that you have postpartum anxiety? Like how are you treating, or like when do you officially can diagnose somebody with postpartum anxiety?
Yeah. So again, that kind of goes back to when you asked about anxiety. It's when
Right.
it becomes disruptive, when mom is feeling distressed, when she's feeling just like she can't control her thoughts, she can't control her behaviors. Maybe she's neglecting herself to, focus all on baby, because what we want to see is we want to see a healthy balance of, mom focusing on baby and focusing on herself. And but with postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression too, a lot of the focus becomes on baby, all becomes on baby, and almost too much. It's like, oh, I have to change baby's diaper every hour or every 10 minutes, or I need to wash my hands, every 30 minutes. Or I need to check on baby all night so that baby doesn't stop breathing. And so we just see a lot of repetitive, almost excessive behaviors. And that's when we kind of say, okay, like this has been going on for a while. And that's when it's usually diagnosed. Because like I said, it can be very normal to be like, oh, is baby awake? Is baby breathing? Like all of us do that, I think. But when you're staying up all night and, washing your hands 30 times a day, that's when it's like, okay, we gotta address this.
How long after birth is it considered postpartum depression or anxiety versus normal? And are they the same?
Good question. So they say about 6 to 7%, I think, of pregnant moms get postpartum or perinatal anxiety, and then about 10% get it postpartum.
Mm.
And so sometimes you just have it during pregnancy, and like it just continues and it just continues. So there's no like time frame, like, oh, it pops up at 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and that's when it's diagnosable. But with postpartum depression, I know you didn't ask about that, but this is a really important distinction, is there's something called the baby blues. And I think about 80 to 90% of moms will feel weepy and sad and just like sometimes just hopeless. And that happens from birth to like 2 to 3 weeks. And then after 3 weeks, typically we see the baby blues kind of go away. A mom's kind of getting used to her role, and it kind of goes away. If she's still feeling extremely weepy, sad after 3 weeks, that's when we say, okay, this could be postpartum depression. So to answer your question, there's no distinction really that I know of for postpartum anxiety as far as like when it begins, but postpartum depression, there is that distinction.
Interesting. And how much of a role does support play in experiencing depression and anxiety after having a kid?
Huge. They actually say that. I went to a conference and a psychiatrist there who specializes in postpartum, he said that support is much more like of a factor in wellness than medication. So he was like, I could give moms all these different medications and they would do nothing if she didn't have support. And he said that support is way more powerful than any medication that he could give. So I think support is huge and it's needed. And I think it's something that should be talked about more because I think that it's very natural for all of us to say like, oh, how's baby? Like, oh, let me hold baby. And I think focus should really be on like mom, like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, do you need a meal? Do you need to go take a shower? I'll hold baby for you. You can go take a nap. Because those first 90 days, I mean, those first years after baby, but especially those 90 days after having a baby are so difficult, exhausting, emotional, and moms really need that support then.
And as you kind of started to talk about like depression versus anxiety, are postpartum anxiety and depression treated differently?
Um, yes, in that some of the coping strategies that I teach to moms with postpartum anxiety are different than postpartum depression. But support is definitely a common treatment for both. Like one of the biggest things that I do with moms when they come in is like, okay, who's your support network right now? And they're like, oh, like this person and this person. And I'm like, all right, let's call in all the people right now. Let's call in cousin. Like, do you have an aunt that maybe you can call in for a few days? Like, let's get your friends on board. Like, let's get everybody kind of helping you right now. And I'll do that with either postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. They're kind of the same, but like the coping strategies are much different with with those disorders.